All right, I know this is on video. This is the first episode I'm doing in a sweatshirt. I hope everybody's comfortable with that. I always wear like a collared shirt or a t-shirt, the sweatshirt. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the concept of suffering and that suffering is actually an optional choice for people. And my guest is Dr. Michelle Gordon. And there's a lot of things Michelle Gordon does, but one of them is she's a podcaster and the host of a show called the Menopause Movement. She's also the founder of the Mental Mastery Academy. And the whole purpose of this for her is to end suffering for women going through menopause. She's also a retired surgeon, by the way, New York City surgeon. And she's going to help navigate this conversation with me. So Michelle, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Before we get into your past, why is it that you chose this path, this whole path of starting the podcast, starting this company, and this whole initiative to helping women going through menopause?
When menopause hit me, I was in my 40s. I was laying on the couch reading a book, and I felt this. So whenever I was embarrassed as a kid, I would always like my face would flush, right? So I'm just laying there reading this book, and it wasn't anything racy or anything, and all of a sudden I felt this flush, and I felt like I was embarrassed. And I was like, oh, is this what a hot flash feels like? And I was a full-time surgeon at the time. My wife is a primary care doctor. And I have friends who are gynecologists. And I said, hey, this is kind of weird. And not only am I noticing that I'm having these hot flashes, but I'm starting to notice that I wake up in the middle of the night with my racing thoughts and I can't get back to sleep. And because of that, I'm having more brain fog and I'm having trouble recalling the names of things that I've always been able to recall. I started getting really moody, crying at commercials. I mean, just really weird like behavior that I didn't feel like myself. I went to my friend who's a gynecologist, and the basic consensus was, well, this is just something you have to suffer through. As someone who's always achieved her goals, I was like, this doesn't seem right. Why should I have to suffer through this? And I went to do some research. And I went to Google to do some research. It was like, do this, no, do that, no, do this, no, do that. No, you've got to do that. And it was like super disjointed and weird. It was confusing for me as a doctor. And so I went on this quest. I'm like, I got to solve this menopause problem, because as I did my research and I started to understand what was going on, started reading scholarly articles, menopause is the next phase in a woman's life. So if we have puberty, where we start having periods, and then when we stop having periods, we have menopause. And menopause is there's perimenopause, where, the periods might be erratic and our hormone levels will start to change. And then we have postmenopause, when you haven't had a period for at least a year for women who are in their 50s and 2 years for women who are in their 40s. But the symptoms can last forever. And I was like, well, holy crap, I don't want to feel like this for the rest of my life. What am I going to do? And so I went on this quest, and just to solve my own problems, I did a bunch of research on nutrition and exercise and science, all the science behind the hormones. As I did that, I realized, if the journey is this hard for me, who has a lot of access to doctors, it must be just really, really hard for somebody who doesn't understand the human body at all. So I started reaching out. I created a community, and we did this TV show, and it's on my YouTube channel, the TV show. It's called the Dr. Michelle Gordon Show. And we published it out on the YouTube channel a couple of years ago. I was like, how come nobody's talking about this? Why is it so hard to get women to talk about menopause? And through my research, I realized that women don't want to talk about menopause because it means they're old. Yeah. And if that's for somebody else, because I'm not old. Right. And so that's why the name of my company is the Menopause Movement, because if we don't start talking about it and start to reframe how we believe around menopause, then it's going to be really hard for us to start to accept that 50 is the new 30.
Yep. Right. So the key phrase to me is we got to start talking about it. I think there are a lot of things we have to start talking about in life, right? I mean,
yeah.
You walked away from being a surgeon during a pretty interesting time. You walked away, what, last year?
It was, yeah, I gave up my privileges in July of 2020. And it had been coming for a while. I had grown my practice to very successful. I had 5 surgeons, including myself, 2 hospitals. And I hated my life, hated everything about my life. I didn't like managing surgeons. I didn't like fighting with insurance companies to get paid, which is something that happens in America. And I hated the way that the hospital administration treated me and treated my employees. And as a result of that, had to sit and think, well, what do I want my life to look like? And thankfully I'm, like I said, I always meet my goals. So I was a super high achiever. I saved a lot of money. And I said, well, I want my life to look like, you know, helping women. I mean, if I can get this word out, then I can actually help others decrease their suffering or shorten that gap at least. Because when I put all my solutions into place, I started sleeping through the night. I lost 50 pounds. I had a lot more energy. I didn't have joint pain anymore. I mean, just all these things. I was like, okay, well, if I can do it, you know, and it took me several years. What happens if I show women how to, you know, what I did in a systematic way so they can start to make these changes in their lives. And you know, the problem with change is that without accountability, it's really hard to do it. So unless you're super, super motivated, it's really hard to make the changes that you got to make. And that's why our program is a year.
You know, I wonder if did you just lose faith and trust in the whole structure of the hospital system?
Well, a lot of things happened. I mean, that, you know, they've really removed a lot of regulations. And so what's happened is the medical system in America has consolidated, and doctors are, there's intentionally not taught business in medical school so they can become a cog in a wheel. While they're high paid cogs, they're still cogs, and there's a big burnout factor. When I was working for the corporation, I took a lot of call. So I was doing like maybe 6 or 7 calls a month when I worked for the corporation, and they never acknowledged that time that I spent. It was like expected.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be up all night and then expected to be in the clinic the next morning, or I would work all weekend and still expected to be in the clinic on Monday. And it was just like, call doesn't matter. It's like free time. And so I ended up actually getting fired from that job because I kept pushing back at them. I'm like, well, wait a minute, what about my time? When I got fired from that job in 2012, I went and reopened my practice because I was like, okay, well, I can still do this. I just got to do it my way. And so I did, and it was great. And I was able to grow my practice to 5 surgeons. And I just did surgery that I like to do, which is emergencies. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, some of the laws changed around reimbursement. And the biggest thing was that the medical system is set up so that when people can get help, right? You go in, you get help. And the insurance companies, you know, people pay their premiums. They're supposed to pay the doctors.
Yeah.
But those are all losses according to the insurance company. And so they do their best not to pay. And that puts a big strain because, you know, if you're running a small business, you still have to pay all your employees and things like that. And so the reimbursement was just, it was just becoming less and less and less. And as a matter of fact, you know, I've been closed for over, you know, a year and a half, and I still have millions of dollars in outstanding, you know, that we're trying to, you know, a revenue that we're trying to pull in through. We had to go to lawsuits to get it. And so no one should have to work that hard to get money.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I see this. Oh God, I could ask you 1,000 questions here.
Well, you know, but going, you know, and the problem is that the insurance companies have done a really good job of making doctors the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know, greedy doctors. But let's remember that the insurance companies are making money off your premiums. So you're going to pay every month. And then what they're going to try to do is not pay anybody. They try to not pay anybody that gives you care.
Yep.
So that they can increase their revenue per share for their shareholders, and then give the big bonuses to the CEOs. Back in the day, insurance companies were not for profit. Yep. And when insurance companies were not for profit, then it worked.
Yep.
But now with the, you know, the changes, because America is the home of the corporation and the land of the profit.
Yes.
So,
yeah, it is. And I wonder if insurance companies are giving a bad name to all for-profit companies.
Yeah. I mean, that, you know, when they're denying care to somebody based on, you know, something that's not medical.
Yep.
I mean, it's just really cheap in the degree. I mean, I spent 15 years getting my degree, and with all these mid-levels now, you know, wanting to be called doctor, the whole gestalt has changed, and doctors are not respected anymore. And I don't think you should just trust people. I agree with that. I don't trust everybody.
Yep.
You got to vet out your doctor, but also your doctor has spent a lot more time learning than that PA that you go to or that nurse practitioner.
Yep.
And it's a confusing, I think it's a confusing time in medicine.
Yeah.
And then with COVID, what happened was I worked the first wave of COVID and here in New York, and nobody was surviving. I mean, we had people prone and people with all sorts of organ failure, and it's demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down and I said, what do I want my life to look like? It's not this.
Yep.
It's just not this.
Right.
And so I went all in on the menopause movement. And that's, and so we provide world-class transformational education and coaching to help women stop the suffering that comes with menopause. And that's really the main thing.
Well, it sounds like in that moment, you made the decision to stop suffering. It was that simple almost, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was like, well, I don't love this life. And,
Right.
and what do I need to do? I started looking at like, what actions do I need to take to create a life I love? And the first thing I had to do was give up surgery. For a long time, there was no other option. Surgery was it.
Yep.
But, yeah.
So before we started recording, I told you a little bit about what I do, but a lot of it, all of it, centers around communication between people, and often it's helping people communicate what they're not communicating, and then helping others do the same. So we just kind of get the reality of a situation on the table, the truth as we see it on the table. And I think, if we could just spend a little bit of time on your upbringing. I know that you were born and raised in Washington State.
Yeah.
If I could highlight your upbringing, maybe you could dig into the upbringing. If I could just kind of hit a couple of the downsides of it. I mean, I know you've talked about you wanted to be a doctor from the age of 5. At least that's what you told yourself then. Later on, you changed your mind. But still, I know you were abused as a child. I know that your son had leukemia and you had to suffer through that as you were going through a divorce. I know your husband left you. I know your brother passed away and you're going through all of that then, and trying to find your way as a doctor. And you're gay, and so you were married, and it's like you kind of knew you were gay, but so you've had to kind of face a lot in your life. I guess where I don't know where I want to dig in. It's for me, it comes back to the trust piece. You had something happen to you when you were a child. Yeah. Which could have destroyed your ability to connect with other people or ever trust your own judgment for the rest of your life. How often do you think about that? And would you mind sharing a little bit about how you started to recognize, man, this is not right?
Yeah. So I was brutally sexually abused for years, and I don't remember all of it. And there were multiple people, one of whom was my grandfather, and one of them may have been my father, but I don't really remember. So there's a whole year of my life I don't remember. And I started remembering some things when I was 15. And at that time, I actually ran away from home, went to foster care, moved about 8 times that year. I got to a point where I would change home so much that I just put stuff in bags to move. And I was never homeless, but I was always looking to improve. And so what happened was, as I started to realize what was happening, I had also always had an affinity to women. I was sexually attracted to women. And, we could talk about it as a chicken egg thing. If I hadn't been sexually abused, would I have been straight? I don't know. I mean, I don't have a problem. Sexuality is so weird and fluid. I mean, I do have sexual desire for men, but I just tend to connect with women. Mm-hmm. And so I was also this, now it's the 80s. Okay. And I was very Christian. I grew up in Southeastern Washington State. There's a church on every corner, and there's only one religion. There's only one way through. And that was my life back then. And I had to resolve this gayness with this Christianity. And how do I do that? And so what I did was there were options. There was this thing called Exodus back then, Exodus International, and it's been disbanded, but it was a way to like pray away the gay. And it was a self-development. It's a thing. Yeah. It's a thing. And so I went and did this program. I moved from Washington State after I left it. I had a relationship with a woman who was 20 years older than me. And, let's not even get into the mommy issues there. And I ended that, and I moved to Washington State. I mean, I moved to California to go through this program. And this program was really great because what I learned from that program was personal responsibility. I started learning about understanding that the fact that I was abused wasn't going to affect me for the rest of my life, that like, it's not their fault that I'm doing the things I'm doing. And so when I was actually, the big key there was forgiveness. And, I don't ever have to like, say that what they did was okay, because it shaped me in ways that like hit my psyche in really horrible ways and caused a lot of problems. But I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't had those experiences. And so it was a big, deep amount of acceptance and forgiveness of me, forgiveness of my parents, forgiveness of the people who, used me as their sexual tool. And as I was able to do that, I was able to start understanding that I was responsible for my outcomes, and my life started to turn around.
Right.
I mean, I know there's a lot to unpack there.
Well, yeah. I don't even have the skills to unpack it, but I do have curiosity, and I've heard this before where victims of sexual abuse block it out often, where they just don't recall, or so. It's almost like you just shut down, and then, so you have no recollection, and then all of a sudden you had an awareness one day.
Yeah. So it was really weird. There were a couple of things I remembered. I was doing some subconscious work with that group, that ex-gay group, through prayer.
Yeah.
And I had a memory, like when I was 5 years old, I wanted to go, 5 or 6, I think. I wanted to go to my grandparents' house by myself. I loved going. They had a ranch, it was a cattle farm. Every time we went there, it was awesome. Just run around, and there was a creek behind there. We could go catch fish, all these things.
Right.
And I wanted to go, and I wanted to be like the center of attention. So I wanted to go by myself. And I begged my parents to let me go. I'm like, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. So my dad took me there and dropped me off. And the next morning I screamed at the window until he came and got me. And so I wanted to dig into like what happened. And so as we did this prayer, I had a memory, and the memory was my grandfather came to me in the middle of the night. And the memory was real. And I know it was real because of proportions. The bed was super big. His hands were super big. And those were the memories that I had. And then I screamed bloody murder at the window the next morning until my dad came to get me. And I mean, there's like, there's this whole hero feeling like when seeing my dad's van, drive up. And I remember my grandmother saying to my grandfather, "What did you do to her?"
You do recall that?
Yeah.
And did you tell your dad?
I did.
What did he do? What did he do?
So, I mean, I don't think I told him. I didn't tell him until I was a teenager, or in my 20s, maybe after my son was born. I can't remember, but he just passed. Actually, no. Oh my God. So my grandparents had a 50th wedding anniversary, and I had already like talked about it then, because I was 18 years old, and everybody just made excuses for this guy. Right. And what happened was I went to their 50th wedding anniversary, and my grandfather pinned me against the wall and put his hand between my legs. I'm 18 years old. And he says, "I told you you like to be manhandled a little bit." And I said, "No, I don't. Don't ever do that again." So he started making fun of me and started grabbing for me every time I was in his presence. And I said, that was it. And so that was it. I went to see my brother, who passed away, talked to him about it. And we ended up leaving in it was a really bad ice and snowstorm. And we just left. And everybody was making excuses for this guy.
Wow. I guess.
So we took a stand.
I mean, we only have an hour, so I'm like, I want to ask you another question.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to, dig into any of these things. But again, we can go back to talking about suffering. Did I suffer in that moment? Sure. Do I suffer now from it? No. I mean, I can talk about it. And I find that when I started talking about these things and getting them out from underneath the rocks, what happened was, for me, it just helped it become just something that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But
where did you find having gone through that, your choice was to pack up and move.
Yeah.
It sounds like you didn't feel like you could talk to anybody close to you about it. So you ended up somewhere else. Somewhere along the way, you found this group to help you sort through it.
Yeah.
You end up getting married. Somewhere in the middle, you meet your boyfriend slash fiance slash husband,
Yeah.
get married, and he leaves. But and your son is sick. So like, where did the resilience come from? Because at that point in your life, I would think you're still fragile.
I wasn't, I don't, so how I like to see it is I've always been a get back on the horse person. And so even when I was that child who was brutally abused, maybe even by a priest down the street, I can't remember. I had this recurring nightmare of somebody in black coming and killing my whole family. So,
Well,
put that, we can like analyze that. But I don't know if it was compartmentalization. I'm not really sure how I did it, but I never let any of that affect my happiness until maybe when I was 15. I started having, some like, why did this happen to me? And, why not me? And why me? And all that stuff. And so I had to work through it. But I also was like, I always had like really lofty goals. Like I always wanted to be a doctor because of the 5-year-old thing where I wanted to make my mom happy. So I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. I got to be a doctor. I got to be a doctor. And when I did that, I was like, well, I got to do these things. These are things I got to do. So I have to like suck it up and get through it. And I didn't understand about suffering until probably like the last like 6 or 7 years.
why was it just a habit?
I think, well, I don't think I really understood the source of suffering is, is really, I mean, if you take anything away from this podcast, I want to say the source of suffering is how we choose to think things, how we choose to view things, what our perspective is. And the sooner we can take something that we observe as bad to neutral, or here's all the good things that happened because of it, then that's how you can kind of get out of suffering.
Your thought process is admirable. I don't think it's the norm, though. Do you? I mean, based on what you observe out there.
I think perspective shifting is a skill, and it's easy to get stuck in our thoughts about something. And that's where I think a coach can really come in and help.
I don't understand why coaching and processing thoughts isn't taught to children. To me, what's unbelievable about your story is you've been able to turn it into a success to help other people, process this and get through this. Why do we have to learn this later in life? Like these awakenings in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Well, I'll tell you the reason is because we train factory workers. We don't train thought leaders, and we don't train personal mastery. We train factory workers. We don't want, you think about it. If you have a world full of independent thinkers, how can the church control them? How can the corporations control them? And so we don't teach independent thought. I mean, we try, like tell me everything you learned from this book, and then write a book review. But, still let's go from class to class to class on bells. When we start to realize that the education system is built to train people to work in a factory, and that was back, from the end of industrial revolution. But if you look at people who were trained, educated in an alternative way, the guys who started Google were trained in Montessori.
Yeah.
Okay. So, they were able to do the really, out of the box thinking. Elon Musk, different kind of education.
Yeah.
So, and I, I'm not saying that education is everything, because, there are some people who are young who are able to kind of get out there, and like Greta Thunberg, for example, right? She's in traditional education, but still has the ability to think differently. So I just think it's more of an anomaly. And if we were able to be disciplined to like there are people out there who take their children all over the world, still do education with them, but the education is travel. And then also we're going to show you, how you read, and how you, do numbers, and how you budget. I mean, why don't we teach people how to budget their money? But because you can't control people who are not in debt.
Fair. It's well, that's the thing. It feels like the same. Go back to the hospitals, and are we really trying to help people live healthy? Which is, I believe, we'll get into that with you. Or are we just reacting to sickness and emergencies? That's how we make money. React to sickness and emergencies. We're not going to make as much money theoretically if we have a healthy population, right?
Well, that's look. I mean, the American medical system is a sick care system,
Yeah.
and doctors are trained to write a prescription.
Yeah.
And that's why when you go to the doctor, I mean, menopause is not a medical condition, yet everybody seems to think it is, because what if the suffering that we have from menopause really has to do with some of our lifestyle choices, which is what I truly believe, which is why I'm the only holistic program out there that looks at, the science, how you eat, how you think, how you move, right? If we start to change the way we eat, who loses? Well, that's the, fast food, right? If it's not a medical condition, who loses? Well, pharmaceutical and supplement companies. If there's another thing I want you to get, if you're a menopausal woman or perimenopausal, you are not broken. You are going through something natural. This is a natural process that, your hormones are supposed to rebalance. It's a natural rebalancing. Anyone saying that you have to balance your hormones, you're estrogen dominant, that is all bullshit. Okay. Unless you've got premature ovarian failure, which is different, and you need hormones. Okay. And then you go to the gynecologist, you go to the endocrinologist. Balancing your hormones in menopause is what your body is doing. It's natural.
What you're getting at, though, did you read the book Younger Next Year by any chance?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
So as you're talking, the books that come to my mind: Younger Next Year, The Mood Cure, Mindset by Carol Dweck. I'm just thinking of books I've read that this is what pisses me off. I'm gonna preface what I'm about to say. The Mood Cure talks about just the health and wellness of our brains and the impact of diet and sleep, for example, on our brains. So you talk a lot about why we need to eliminate, say, sugar, which I've drastically cut in the last 5 years and feel like a totally different person. But it's still viewed like, I eat a gluten-free diet. I've eaten gluten-free for almost 10 years. It's still very much mocked, even though it's more normal in the stores and the restaurants and all that. Anytime, I'd say the masses don't take it seriously. Like, oh, you believe that crap? You really think that? Do you run into that at all? And do you find that, we're working against a totally different way of thinking?
Well, yeah. I mean, because let's look at the food pyramid, right? Who does the food pyramid really benefit? Factory farms. And we've got the biggest social nutritional experiment here in North America over the last 50 years. Because when you look at pictures of crowds from the 70s,
it's much smaller.
There was no obesity. Yeah. And we've got fast food companies that are specifically working on things in the lab that will hit your pleasure centers in your brain to make you addicted to it.
Yep.
Right. So it's fat and crunch and salt and all these things. I mean, do I love French fries? Yeah, I do. But when I eat them, I feel like shit. Because why? Because it's cooked in this toxic seed oil. So let's talk about seed oils for a second. There's 3 C's and 3 S's: corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, safflower, sunflower. If you remove those along with some sugar, like if you cut back on sugar, if you have joint pain, if you have exercise intolerance, now this is general and there's no one size fits all, but I'll tell you, if you remove toxic seed oils and you remove sugar from your diet, you're going to feel a ton better. And along with sugar, it's removing these processed kinds of manufactured things like manufactured breads and that kind of thing. So this is advice that I always give freely, because if you just take those 2 things out of your diet, that's going to radically decrease your inflammation and it's going to help you. And if you want to read about seed oils, I recommend a book by Dr. Kate Shanahan. I also did a podcast with her, but she wrote a book called Deep Nutrition, which changed my life. So what happens in these seed oils is that, say, cottonseed, right? And what happened was the cotton seeds that were discarded were starting to get rancid, and like, oh, what can we do with this? And through the manufacture of these oils, what's happening is they go through a plastic, solid process. and then they have to change the chemical structure to make it not solid, but liquid. And when they do that, it's hydrogenation. And when they do that, what happens is when it gets to high heat, it's completely unstable, and that affects us at a genetic level. It's called epigenetics, the very top part of our genes. And so I do my best to not eat any fried food outside of my home.
And that's what ultimately is causing all of our inflammation problems.
Well, it's a contributor for sure. I mean, there's other things, the fact that our wheat is different. I mean, I don't feel crappy when I eat wheat in Europe, when I eat gluten-based foods in Europe.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. If to your point, in the 70s and before, if you look at a picture of any population of people, they look good. They look good. And then is it the way in which we've chosen to manufacture food to just make money, or is it we are eating too much of it, or is it a combination of both?
Well, you're going to remember this, and maybe some of our listeners won't, but in the 80s, you remember what happened with farms?
Yeah, they
Right?
started.
So,
Yeah. John Mellencamp wrote a song about it.
yeah. So what happened was we had all these mom and pop farms that provided food, and they were pretty much organic, and they weren't genetically modified. And that was where the food came from, mom and pop farms. And then we had these corporate takeovers, and we've seen the exact same thing happen in medicine. I just want to say that that's the correlation that I like to use, because the mom and pops got, eaten up by the corporations and had to sell and, went bankrupt and that sort of thing. And the food production, the quality has gone down. The problem I have is Roundup Ready, because that's toxic. That's making that's making the corn or the whatever it is stay alive when you spray a toxic chemical on it.
Oh, wow.
Right. Okay. And so it isn't so much like let's add a nutritional component to this, or let's make it bigger, or, because corn initially didn't have these big kernels. I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is introducing genetic modifications that make it stay alive in the face of this horrible, toxic Roundup.
Yeah, poison. Right, exactly.
Poison.
Right.
And what happens is that when they've used Roundup Ready crops, right? You put the seeds down, the seeds are going to fly to another farm. There's movies that have been done about that. Roundup gets sprayed, the stuff stays alive, and then the cattle will go and eat it, or whatever livestock goes and eats it, and they die because it's got Roundup all over it, and it's still alive. And so it's just, and these are just study after study after study. That's why I really stay away from that.
Okay. So obviously this doesn't just impact menopausal women. This impacts all of us. So this is one of the things that you do with your, to help, is to educate your client base on food choices. And again, it's their decision.
Right.
Talk about exercise, talk about the mind and how that plays into your offering.
Well, as you know, from Younger Next Year, when you start, if you don't have a plan when you retire, right? If you don't have a plan to say, either start a business like I am, or start to move your body a little bit, you're going to get sedentary. I mean, if all you do when you retire is watch Netflix, what's going to happen? Right? You're going to, and Netflix is awesome. I love Netflix. I'm not hating on Netflix, but I am saying that it's easy to get stuck in the inertia of the couch. And so, I think retirement is awesome. I love the fact that I don't have to go into a hospital and jump through hoops anymore. Do I miss surgery? Sometimes, but not a whole lot. I mean, it came with a lot of risk, had a lot of anxiety around it. So, I have a lot less anxiety, and there's no emergencies in my business.
Right.
If there's the biggest emergency is a website goes down.
Right.
Right.
You have more energy. You have more energy and enthusiasm, it sounds like, than you did when you were actually doing that.
Yeah. I'll tell you the main reason why I retired was I said, I want a normal sleep schedule. Yeah. I took 10 days of call a month, and that meant I didn't sleep 10 days. And I was like, I need to have a normal sleep schedule. So to back to your point, with exercise, one thing is that we have to move our body. Our bodies are made to move. Myrna Valerio wrote a really, really great book called A Beautiful Work in Progress. She's a plus size athlete. She does ultra marathons. And she just doesn't care about weight loss. She eats whatever she wants, but she runs 50 to 100 miles at a time. Crazy. At the end of that book, there is a keynote that she did that just moved me. And it's like, just because we have extra weight on us doesn't mean that we don't move our bodies. Our bodies are meant to move. And so if you haven't moved your body in several years, start with, my friend Talyn, she was 400 pounds and she started rocking back and forth and now she's running, she's lost 150 pounds or something. But she was 400 pounds, and she had let the couch kind of get to her, but she just started like rocking back and forth. This is not the life I want. I need to change it. So anytime you go to make a change, right, you've got to, you get starts with awareness, and then you have to make a decision to change. And how can you actually stick with it? Because after a few weeks or a few days, if there's a setback, it's easy to go back to your old ways. And so that's where accountability comes in. That's why
Self accountability or group accountability, peer accountability.
Well, so I'll tell you, every time I've actually been able to make changes was because I was accountable to somebody else. I'm highly motivated. I'm like a unicorn, right? Because I'll just do stuff.
Yeah.
Because I meet my goals, and if I can't meet my goals, I'm completely frustrated, and so I have to meet my goals. But there are days when I just sit on the couch. I'm not going to lie. I'm very real about this. I struggle with my own mental health and depression and all the things. And so how do I get myself to go and do my exercise? The main thing is to just put on my shoes, to start finding the triggers that'll get you to go and do things. So like every day I put on exercise clothes every day. And sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't.
But you're ready just in case the mood strikes.
Yeah.
So you're in a constant battle with your mind. That's probably the trickiest part. As a coach, that's the hardest thing. The action or the requirement or the skill, that's easy. The experience, people know how to do stuff. Everyone knows how to do stuff. It's decided.
How do you get yourself to start doing it?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, it comes down to finding triggers. And the other thing about motivation is that I think motivation is a lie. And I'm going to tell you why. Because motivation comes from seeing results. And so when you lower your expectations from an all or nothing to a, can I do better than yesterday? And I've got a great example this morning. I just got up. My wife had just finished a workout. I said, how was your workout? She said, wasn't that good? I didn't hit my metrics. I said, well, did you do better than yesterday? I didn't work out yesterday. I said, well, did you do better than yesterday? And she's like, yeah, I guess I did. And so if we stop comparing ourselves, especially menopausal women, because women gain weight in menopause. That's just
no matter what they do, no matter what they're eating.
We've surveyed over 50,000 women in menopause. 48% of them want to lose weight. So, are you going to gain weight in menopause? Probably. If you don't gain weight in menopause, then, it's because of the physiology of it. Losing estrogen, the belly weight stays on. It's just a physiological thing. What I had to do for me was I had to stop comparing myself to when I was fat in my 20s. So, because my personal view of myself was I'm fat, and I've been fat my whole life. So whether I'm, I was in my 20s and I was, really probably below weight, but still thought I was fat.
Yep.
To when I was 230 pounds, was fat. So I had to say, well, I had to change. I really had to change that. Like, is it all or nothing? I don't have to be all or nothing. Can I get better than yesterday? Can I do today better than yesterday? And 1% improvement. And, if you do a 1% improvement week on week, you're going to have 166% improvement over the year.
How much does your circle of friends or family or whatever you want to call, whatever your group is, how much do they play a role in your motivation, desire, commitment? Is that important or not?
So I'm currently in too many coaching programs to get better.
Too many?
Yeah. I'm in 5, I think, right now.
Oh.
It's too many. One is an 8-week program that's super exciting, but I just joined one that was 2 years, and then I join others that are a year at a time. I think if I can get down to 3, it'll be good. But I like to pick and choose the best of these people that I work with. And building this business has been really hard, trying to figure out how to, I've decided to just call it a new residency in marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it is, right?
Because it's for some people, marketing comes really easy. And for me, I had to really rethink what failure means, because, when you're a doctor, failure means death or bad outcome. And when you're in marketing, failure means just do another iteration.
You're doing something right. I mean, I see how often you're posting and how much content you're putting out there. You're doing your friend's version of, you're just rocking back and forth. Eventually it will lead, and I'm sure it already has led to success.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting
Yeah.
there. I mean, it depends on your version of success and what
Yeah.
that means. I think when it comes to building a business, you want the business to support your lifestyle.
Yep.
And that's what we have to, that's what we have to get to.
Well, the good news is you believe in what you're doing. So, I mean, the fuel's there. The fuel's there.
Definitely.
All right. I'm going to give you the last word, but just to recap, for anybody that might be suffering, let's just say any woman, and I'm going to say it applies to everybody, but let's just say any woman who's about to go through, finishing off menopause, you can ease that suffering and potentially like mitigate it down to low levels if.
So I think the main thing for us to remember is that suffering comes from our thoughts. And when we start to look at, and this is what I do, like, why am I suffering? Well, I'm perseverating on a thought. And what is that thought telling me? Well, that I suck, or, here's an example. I'll give you an example. I used to, like, I just said that I've been fat my whole life, right? That was the how I viewed myself. And at the end of 2018, I was on this trip in the Caribbean on a cruise ship. And I kept looking in the mirror saying, you're so fat. You're so fat. I hate you. And I kept saying, well, if that was one of my clients, how motivating would that be? And I made this, it was the end of the year, so I had to make a New Year's resolution, right? And I made this resolution and I said, I am going to look in the mirror, no matter if my first thought is I hate you, or my first thought is you're fat. I'm going to look in the mirror and say, I love you. And that's when I was able to, now I had already lost weight, but I was able to start to move more. And as that, I was able to change my diet a little bit more and drop even more weight. And I'm still not at my goal weight, but I actually have a lot better acceptance because I've changed the way I view myself. And that's just thought. That's just the story that I tell myself.
Yeah. So that's one thought. And then couple that with conscious decisions around food, conscious decisions around activity, and maybe even sleep. Do you get into that?
Yeah, we have a program called Slimming Through Slumber, actually, which is, and when you go to the website and take the quiz, that's the offer on the back of it. And it's cheap. It's like $29. And the whole idea is how can you optimize your sleep? Because if you don't sleep well, these are all the things that are going to happen. In doing my client interviews that I've been doing over the last few days, women join my program and they make these massive changes in the first 8 weeks. Now it's a 1-year program because you can fall off the wagon, right? But one of the things I hear over and over is I can sleep through the night now. And that can, and one woman lost 17 pounds in 8 weeks. And so it's just a matter of like, when you make small changes that aren't all or nothing, they don't feel like big lifestyle changes. They're just little things. And when you make these little changes, they stack. And as they start to stack, like the energy comes back and the sleeping gets better and you start to feel like yourself again. And that's the biggest culprit in menopause, the biggest cause of suffering in menopause is I don't feel like myself. And I just want me back.
I can't relate as a man. Men don't go through this, right? There's no version.
No, I mean, men don't really have men's, you think about it, the sperm are viable all the way to the end. Right.
Well, mine are retired, just like you as a surgeon. Mine are retired. So it's funny, not to drag you, but I've had sleep issues my whole life, but I found out later in life I have sleep apnea, and I've talked about it before. Okay. But getting that under control and being on the CPAP machine has completely changed my life.
I can imagine.
Completely changed my life. And then I read a book called Why We Sleep, which was
I read
fascinating.
that book too. Great book.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Very technical. Like there's a lot of medical stuff in there that kind of drove my head, but the impact on lack of sleep on our health, mental health and physical health is, I couldn't believe what I was reading. But as somebody who suffered from sleep apnea blindly for years, I had all of that stuff going on. So I think that the fact that you actually have that in your program is a lifesaver for people. I don't think people realize what that exhaustion is almost a habit.
Yeah, you know, Ariana Grant, no, not Ariana Huffington wrote a book about sleep because she actually suffered from exhaustion. She had this thought that, you know, she could only, you know, she should only get a few hours of sleep every night. And she actually fell down and had a head injury from it.
Wow.
And so then she wrote a book about it. And the point I'm making is that we've got this culture around sleep that says if you only sleep 3 hours a night, you're a badass. And for me, anyone who sleeps 8 hours, 8 hours a night, they're the badass because their body is recovering. Their brain is getting rid of all the negative thinking that's happening. You're working through it. You know, you're able to manage your stress better. Cortisol levels go down. Sleep is really important. If you want to lose weight, sleep is the number one thing. More than, I mean, obviously it's diet and exercise and diet more than exercise. But at the same time, you got to make sure you have quality food, you got to drink enough water, all those things. But if you start with your sleep, something that you can actually control, then and that's not to say, I mean, I understand that there's insomnia and there's other problems, but if you don't have a medical condition that keeps you from sleeping, just creating a sleep routine is going to be the thing that changes everything for you.
That's another podcast we should do. You're validating me in this podcast. I'm like this. I think about this stuff all the time. All right.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything. This is such an interesting conversation to me. And I'd love to do another one in the future if you're open to it. There's so much we could talk about. So Dr. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your fall.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.